Welcome to the Hidden Bookcase. Come through and get cozy. Pick a book, your favourite book, that's the one that opens this room. Inside you'll find a warm fire, a loving cat, and a wide skylight to the stars.
And a dangerously high to be red pile.
I'm Morgan, I use they them pronouns, and I am a surprise magical flower.
I'm Soren, I use he him pronouns, and I'm a liar and a player too.
And I'm Red, today's guest, and I am an outdoor girl.
Soren and I have been friends for over a decade, and the two of us are always swapping books.
Each fortnight, the two of us, sometimes with help from a friend, take it in turns to recommend one another a favourite read. The first-time reader tells us what they know about the book, makes some predictions about what they don't, and then we discuss our thoughts with all of you bookworms, this month by reading mythology retellings.
So today, let's get to talking about...
Hadestown by Anaïs Mitchell. So, we're joined today by Red from Overly Sarcastic Productions. Hello, Red.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for being here.
Because when you guys reached out, it was like, yeah, we're reading a bunch of books, and I was like, ooh, reading books. Is it okay if we do something I've already done? And that's why we're discussing Hadestown, a musical I was fortunate enough to be able to see a few months back, and it's so good, and it's such a fun adaptation of a classic myth. But it also almost goes beyond that by adding a bunch of complex themes about circularity and retelling the same stories, even though we know they're going to end sadly, because there's still this hope that somehow this time it'll be fine, even though we know it won't be. It's just so interesting to me.
And what's Hadestown about? Does one of you guys want to tell me?
Sure. Hadestown is a semi-modern-ish retelling of the classic Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, which is a story of Orpheus, who is this magical, incredibly powerful musician/bard. His mother is one of the muses. He's this demigod, basically, and he has just incredible musical powers. And Eurydice is a nymph, and they're slated to get married. But tragedy strikes, Eurydice dies, and Orpheus just goes down into the underworld to try and get her back, because when you're a demigod, that's the kind of thing you can theoretically do. He uses his music to charm his way past the rocks and Kerberos and all the other scary stuff, and when he reaches Hades and Persephone, the king and queen of the underworld, he tries to convince them to let him take Eurydice back with them, and Hades is like, we can't do that. It's super unorthodox. And Persephone is so moved by the beauty of Orpheus's music that she's like, let's give him a shot. Why not? And so Hades is like, all right, fine, you can lead Eurydice out of the underworld, but you can't look back. If you look back, she'll be stuck here forever. And Orpheus is like, okay, cool, super easy. How hard could that be? Leads her out of the underworld, but he does indeed get worried that maybe she's not even there at all. And he looks back and she was there the whole time, but then she gets dragged back to the underworld and he is so sad that he gets dismembered about it. So that's the original version. Hadestown is a little bit different. But the broad strokes are basically the same. Orpheus doesn't get dismembered, but everything else is pretty much the same. With additional character details, because instead of just being sort of stock archetypes, Eurydice has a personality and agency in the story, and Hades and Persephone have a lot more development, and their own relationship troubles become kind of a running theme throughout the entire story. And instead of it just being Orpheus tries to get his girl back and fails, it becomes a story about Orpheus trying to save the world and succeeding, but not being able to save it for himself or the one he loves. And it's very, very sad. I hope that worked.
That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I have to admit, I completely forgot about the dismemberment, and then I was watching the OSP video of the Underworld myths, because I knew that Orpheus and Eurydice were in there, and I was like, oh yeah, the bit where he gets beheaded.
Yeah, he gets ripped apart by Maenads because he's just so sad, and then all of Dionysus's horny female followers show up and is like, hey, pretty boy, show us a good time, and he's like, I can't have a good time, my girl is dead, and they're so mad about it that they just rip him to pieces.
As you do.
Greek mythology. Gotta love it.
I think I can see why they cut that from their musical.
Yeah, the secret post-epilogue, a lot less fun than their, let's raise a glass to Orpheus wherever he may be. It's like, well, I know where he is. He's here and there and there a little bit.
Know where some of them is.
I was literally doing some research just before this, and there's a whole myth where his dismembered head is kept in a cave, half alive, half dead, to spout prophecies for the rest of time.
Yep.
I had never heard that bit before.
It's a major plot point in the Sandman comics, where Orpheus is recharacterized as being Morpheus's son. So Morpheus and Orpheus, it's very, very stupid. But like a lot of Greek characters, his parentage is sometimes a little bit shaky. So I think in some versions, it's like, his mother is one of the muses, but maybe his father is Oneiros, the god of dreams. And it's like, well, maybe, who knows? But yeah, dismembered head saying prophecies. Totally a thing.
Which is just if he's half alive, half dead, then he just never gets to see Eurydice again, which is just...
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah, the existential horror part of it is thinly veiled at most.
God, that is so dark. And how did you find out about Hadestown?
It started getting big online a few years back. People started talking about it. The soundtrack was, of course, all on YouTube. And because my channel does a lot of myth stuff, a lot of people were like, hey, have you heard about this thing? It's like a modern retelling. Hades is like an old-timey coal baron now. And I was like, that sounds a little weird. But I started seeing just more about it. And one of my friends was like, if you're coming to New York, we should see something on Broadway. I've got a few friends that are significantly more into music and musical theater than I am, because I'm just kind of like, sounds pretty cool. But a lot of them like actually know what they're talking about. We'd been talking about, man, yeah, the music in this is really interesting. You know, kind of the genre bending. It's pretty cool. Let's check it out. And we went to see it, and it was really, really good. I'd already heard most of the songs from it. I'd listened through it all at one point. And what I've discovered is that does not actually give you an impression of what it's going to be like to see it performed live on stage. I think Hadestown is the most complicated choreography I've ever seen. Something is always happening. Even the 5 randos in the back who are just kind of filling out the dance choreography, they're all doing their own thing with like the face acting. It's very impressive.
It's such a like holistic musical. Everybody is always doing something. Everything is working together in cohesion, which fits nicely into the themes of community.
Oh yeah. I feel like you could see it like 6 times before you finally saw everything that was happening on stage at all times. They don't tend to keep characters off stage unless it's important that they're off stage. For the whole opening bit, which is mostly about what's happening in the mortal world, Hades and Persephone are just up on the balcony, chilling, and Hades is reading a newspaper the entire time, except when he kind of like looks over, kind of snide about commentary about that Hades is one scary guy, and he's just like, whatever. He's just up there, just chilling. But normally, I think musicals don't really do that. They're kind of like, all right, if you're not on stage, quick change into a new outfit. There's no time to waste. They definitely play with integration into the stage a lot. There's a part, I want to say, between acts, when Eurydice is in the underworld, obviously, Orpheus is trying to get to her. When Orpheus reaches the underworld, he runs up through the aisles to get to her. He ran past us and then climbed on stage. And I was like, oh, okay.
To get a bit technical, it feels very Brechtian in the fact that it keeps reminding you that it is a play and that it's trying to give you a message.
Yeah, they have the character of Hermes who pretty much exists to narrate, constantly break the fourth wall, because he's speaking directly to the audience for almost all of it, but sometimes he turns in and also talks to the characters. And because he's a god, his liminal role in the narrative actually makes a lot of sense. They kind of make it clear that the mortal characters are pretty much stuck on stage and aren't aware of the audience and can't tell what's happening. But the gods, it's a little shakier. Persephone has a whole musical number where she is singing directly to the audience. It's a very interesting way to distinguish between the different roles of the mortals and the gods, and this was like, well, the mortals are part of the play, and the gods sort of exist a little bit outside of it, but not entirely.
It's really fun how they play with the form. Off-Broadway, it was in the round, and apparently a lot more interactive from what people have said. Obviously, they had to lose a little bit of that with a more traditional Broadway production, but even Hermes starting it with a call and response with the audience gives that really different feel to most musicals.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the fact that it literally acknowledges we've done this story before, we're going to do it again and again and again and again. It makes you think about what it means to come and see this play over and over again and what you, the audience, want from it. Because basically the thesis of the play is you come here because you hope it'll turn out differently. We're all here hoping this story will turn out differently. It's not going to, but we still have to try. It matters that we're trying, even if we know it's going to fail every time. Sometimes when you finish a really good story, you're like, I'm not getting anything else done today. I'm just going to lie on the floor and like think about it. This was one of those things where I could like feel that it wasn't going to be enough because I was like, there's too much happening. Every time I think about it, I notice another theme they were doing. But the overarching narrative about how Orpheus is trying to come up with a song that will basically fix the seasons. The world seasons are out of whack. He's not entirely sure why. Winter is going on too long. There's no spring or fall. Straight to summer and then back to winter again. And obviously everyone's like, there's no food and everyone's miserable. And he's like, I bet if I sing at this problem, I'll be able to fix it. But he's correct because what's actually happening is Hades and Persephone are having marital issues. Hades is getting really clingy. So Persephone doesn't have these transitionary periods into or out of the underworld anymore. There's no spring, there's no fall, and winter gets longer and longer because Hades like lets her go for a little bit and then gets jealous and drags her back. And Orpheus basically figures out a song that is the love song that Hades and Persephone used to sing back when their relationship was fresh. And it reminds them of, oh yeah, this is the kind of love that we used to have. That's beautiful. And so it works. He successfully saves the world. But the process of doing it changes him too much. Because at the beginning of the play, he's this bright-eyed idealist boy. If at the very beginning of the play, they were like, hey, you can save Eurydice, just don't look back. He'd be like, okay, I trust you. And it would work fine. But the process of him going through the story just wears him down so much that he no longer has that trust in him. So every time he saves the world and every time it breaks him just enough that he can't save Eurydice or himself. And it's really sad, but also it's kind of got time loop vibes because the way the play ends, everything resets. Eurydice walks in through the door and Orpheus is there. Nobody remembers anything except for Hermes because we're seeing the story starting to play out again. But, well, there's the theme of the flower, which we haven't even touched on. But there's so much stuff happening. But the implication at the end of the time loop is like, maybe this time it could be different. This time, Eurydice looks in her pocket and she finds the flower that Orpheus gave her last time around, and she doesn't know how it got there, but maybe things could be different. And then the play ends, and it's like, how did this make me happy and uplifted when it's the saddest story ever designed?
Yeah.
Honestly, I remember thinking at some point, obviously, there was a discussion about how do we end this adaptation of Orpheus and Eurydice in a way that doesn't make everyone walk out of the theatre.
Just miserable.
And the time loop is the most fantastic way, and it supports the themes. What's the running line with Orpheus? That he sees the way the world could be in spite of the way that it is.
Exactly, yeah.
I remember when we went to see it at the National, just walking out in a fugue state. I will never be okay again.
I don't know where we went for dinner, but I remember sitting in silence with you.
Oh, man. The people I saw it with, we weren't in a fugue state. We went and got dim sum, and it was great. But it was interesting because we'd all noticed extremely different things about it. One of the people I was with was my extremely into music friend, and he was like putting everything together. Like, oh, man, yeah, they did this really interesting thing. This leitmotif that got brought back, that was cool, and all that stuff. And then one of my friends, she'd just been paying attention to all of the background stuff. She was the one who noticed Hades is up there and he's reacting to stuff on stage. The lights aren't even on him. He's just there with his newspaper, but he notices when stuff happens and like does face stuff about it. There's so much happening. Like with a lot of plays, I'm like, yeah, I get it. They planted this, they paid it off this way. It was really nice and satisfying. With this one, I was like, there's like 8 different things going on here, and I can only figure out like 3 of them right now. I know there's more going on. Because when you said they must have had the conversation about how is this play going to end, I almost feel like they must have started with here's how the play is going to end. Because the central thesis of it is, why do we tell this story over and over if we know how it's going to end? And it doesn't really answer that question. It's like that question is the central pillar on which the rest of the play is constructed. Why do we do this to ourselves? Why do we come and see this play over and over again, even though we know it's sad, even though we know it ends badly? And the question doesn't entirely get an answer because, of course, each individual person attending the play has their own answer to that. Why did I come and see this? Why would I come and see it again? Because I would see this again. If nothing else, just to be like, all right, this time I was focusing mostly on the people in front and that one background lady who was doing a lot of face emotion. This time I'm going to focus on the left side of the stage and see what's happening over there. But they present this really interesting question. Why do we fixate on tragedy even though we could choose to do something else? And I feel like the entire theme of the story being so much about there is good in this story. Good things do happen in it. Orpheus saves the entire world. He just can't save it for himself. But I really feel like the starting premise of this was, let's take an iconic tragedy, the classic tragedy, almost the purest form of tragedy. It's got the least amount of complications, messing it up. Character dies, other character has chance to save her and fails. But why does he fail? Why does he look back? Why doesn't Orpheus just do the smart thing? And over the course of the play, it convinces you why Orpheus is going to look back, why he has to look back. But you go in like, a rip to him, but I'm different. I'm smart. I wouldn't do that. I could definitely look away from the love of my life while she's suffering through the underworld alone for hours and hours, possibly weeks. It's easy, because I know the story of Orpheus and Eurydice.
I think one incredible strength of it, apart from convincing you that Orpheus is going to look back, is that it traps you in that perfect sweet spot of resignation and illusion, where you know he's going to look back and you're consumed by the hope that he won't simultaneously. I was massively fortunate enough to see it twice. I saw it with Morgan and then decided, amazing, I'm going to give my father the most selfish Christmas present in the history of the world, which is I'm taking you to Hadestown so I have an excuse to see it again. And I remember sitting there thinking, obviously I know what's going to happen, because the first time, I guess there was at least a small part of my brain that went, maybe they've changed the ending. Maybe they've changed the ending. They haven't changed the ending, but, you know. And then I was watching it again and I was thinking, why am I really hoping that they get out of it this time, even though obviously...
I mean, it's such an interesting part of literary analysis. When you're looking at stories from the top down, it's very easy to sort of pick them apart. It's like, okay, this is exciting incident, planting payoff, yada, yada, do this stuff. But then when you're going through the story, you know, if the story's told well, we get invested in spite of ourselves.
Exactly.
And it kind of almost doesn't matter that I know this is going to end badly. You know, they told me at the beginning, this guy dies. Why am I letting myself care? A good story will make you care in spite of that. And in the case of Hadestown, you go in and you're like, it's an old song. I know this story. She's been dead from the beginning. And none of that matters because the way they do Orpheus is so likable and the way they do Eurydice is so interesting because this is a version of Eurydice that is not just she gets dragged from point A to point B, and then they try to drag her from point B to point A again, and it doesn't work. This Eurydice chooses to go to the underworld without really processing entirely what that means. But they also make you believe that that was the right decision for her to make it. Or not like the right decision, but like you believe that she would make that decision because they establish it over and over again. Orpheus is almost a little bit sheltered from the harsh realities of the world by virtue of his demigodness and his magic songs, and the world literally bends around him. But Eurydice does not have that. If it's cold and she's hungry, Eurydice is cold and hungry. And the fact that Orpheus is separated from that almost drives a wedge between them of this sort of resentment that she doesn't want to feel, but does feel. And basically when she's given the choice between, you can be out in the cold, hungry, with your boyfriend, or you can come down to Hadestown where we have tons of money and work and it's nice and warm down there. She's like, well, I wouldn't make this decision normally, but I am freezing to death, so let's do it. And then she sort of processes like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. And I think it's the Fates who turn out to the audience and are like, better not hear any of you talking smack. Like to see if you'd have made the same decision if you were in her shoes.
The way that character traits work is a microcosm of the larger themes of the naivety versus the realism, Orpheus versus Eurydice, and then that applying to the Hades-Persephone relationship.
Yeah.
It adds so much as a retelling. The original Eurydice is just a prop. Sexy lamp in the underworld. Can replace her with a sexy lamp and nothing changes.
You could easily, yeah. Yeah. She doesn't have a whole lot going on in the original, but I think people find the story fascinating because it has so many unanswered questions. What Hadestown has kind of demonstrated is that this story only works if you really, really care about Orpheus and Eurydice and you understand why they made the decisions they did. Because otherwise it's just like, well, why would Orpheus turn around? He could have saved her if he didn't do that. And I've seen a few people kind of analyze it like maybe Orpheus and Eurydice is a story about grieving. The idea that, oh, if you can just not think about the person you've lost, if you can just not want to turn around and help them, then maybe you could get them back. The whole point of grief is that you can't stop yourself from remembering and caring about the people you've lost. So it could be a story of that kind of inevitability. It also might not be that deep. There are a lot of Greek myths. Most of them are not this good. Shotgun approach to storytelling, one of them was going to be this profound. But I think part of what fascinated the people who made this musical so much was, yeah, why did he do that? And if we go further, why did Eurydice go down to the underworld? If we make this a matter of choice rather than just bad luck or Phrygian the wife, and how did they start the story and who are they at the end? Because the naivete versus realism thing, Orpheus starts the story rather naive, but mostly just optimistic, seeing the way the world could be, whereas Eurydice saw the way the world was. And by the end, they've switched positions.
Exactly, yeah.
She's been inspired by him to see the way the world could be, but he's been ground down to seeing the way the world is, and even the way the world is at its worst, because as he's leaving, he's like, maybe Hades is tricking me. Maybe she's not even there. Maybe he's just trying to fool me. And Hades is not doing that. So he's not even seeing the way the world is. He's seeing the way the world could be, but in a bad way. It wears him down just enough that right when they're reaching the sunlight, he turns around. And it's just heartbreaking because you're like, you could have not done that, except at the same time, this was inevitable. The way that this story plays out, the things that you go through, force you into this characterization, this version of yourself that can't help but turn around. And it's very sad, but also that's why we have this framing sequence. That's why we have Hermes narrating the situation, being like, yeah, this is an old song. It's a tragedy. We knew this from the very beginning. And yet, we're all still here. Isn't that interesting?
Persephone and Hades, to move to them for a sec. We've got a lot of Persephone and Hades retellings at the moment coming out, like every 5 seconds. We love to change things, to romanticize them and give Persephone the choice. At the same time, there's a lot of Hades was perfect. He never did anything wrong. He rescued her from a really controlling mother, and actually he was in the right. That's really not at all true to the myth. And it's interesting to see that that's what we've decided to pick out of the myth and retell in the 21st century. But I really like how in this retelling, Hades is a very flawed character. He's not just sunshine, darkness prince, sweeping her off her feet. There is a lot of problematic things he's doing. He's the embodiment of capitalism. But he's also just a man who's lost sight of what he loves and needs to be reminded of it. And even at the end, he can't help but screw Orpheus and Eurydice over because he knows their motivations enough, because he is so similar to Orpheus. He knows that Orpheus is going to look back because he would.
Yeah.
Making him a 3D character, making him kind of a terrible person as well as a lover. It's just so nice to see.
He does not end the play looking great. Obviously, the underworld is still a capitalist hellscape and all that jazz. Because the thing is, when Orpheus is trying to lead Eurydice out of the underworld, he's also bringing the rest of the dead with him. And when he turns back, we don't see them go, but it's pretty clear that they also get stuck. And the way they characterize Hades is very interesting because he does suck. He's such a villain, but it's really fun. And it ties in with the way they characterize the fates all through the play, because in Greek mythology, the three fates don't tend to show up very much. They're a figure, they exist, they parcel out how long a person's life is, they end it, that stuff. In the space of the play, they sort of make the fates the equivalent of the chorus. They sometimes sing directly to the audience, but mostly what they do is they take the role of bad things happening and bad thoughts haunting people. They sing the musical number. Doubt comes in to Orpheus. His inner worry that this isn't going to work, or like, oh, this is scary, or I don't know if I can do this. And the first time they sing, it doesn't get to him, but the second time, it's what inspires him to turn around. And they sing a lot around Eurydice. They're following her, like they're haunting her. She clearly can't see them, but when she's stuck in the blizzard and the wind rips away her coat and her stuff, it's the fates literally pulling it off of her. They're embodying the fact that she's doomed, basically, doomed by the narrative. And for most of the play, that's how it works. They're singing to Orpheus and Eurydice and sometimes the audience. And then when Orpheus has reached the underworld and he wants to take Eurydice away, for the first time, the fates sing to Hades. They circle him and they're basically singing, caught between a rock and a hard place. If you tell him no, you're a heartless man and you're going to have a martyr on your hands. If you let him go, you're a spineless king and you're never going to get him in line again. It's really interesting because it makes the fates seem like they almost transcend the bounds of the narrative even more than the gods do. They can whisper in anyone's ear, including these divine beings, which is very cool.
It is interesting seeing them take on the role of the chorus. I feel like in most original Greek tragedies, the chorus is sort of there to be like, hey, main character, you shouldn't do that thing. That's a really bad idea. And main character goes, no, I'm going to do it anyway because my hubris is the correct thing. And then they damn themselves. Whereas I feel like here, they're sort of like a darker version of the chorus where they're sort of going, hey, you should do that thing. Like, tap into your worst desires. Do it.
They represent the devil's advocate, basically. Yeah. The chorus in a lot of Greek plays kind of exists to be the surrogate for the audience, where if the audience is like, no, don't do that, that would be bad, the Greek chorus is like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. It seems like it could be bad. And the guy's like, no, I'm going to do it even harder now. In this version, you don't really have a chorus. You just have Hermes, who's kind of playing that role of, maybe you shouldn't do this, kiddo.
Maybe don't propose to her the minute you meet her.
Yeah.
Nothing can go wrong.
The double meaning of when Eurydice is like, is he always like this? And Hermes is like, yep, every time.
Oh, yeah. Oh my god, I hadn't even spotted that.
It's heartbreaking, but like Hermes is in this interesting space. Every time it happens, he's bummed about it, but he also finds joy in the retelling of the story and the fact that even if it ends badly, this love is still there and it still matters and it changes the world, it saves the world, and we're still rooting for these crazy kids. Even if we know this is going to happen intellectually, we still emotionally root for them. We see the way the world could be in spite of the way that it is. We should probably talk about the flower theme because it's so important and it's just not in the songs because it's an entirely visual cue. Basically, when Orpheus and Eurydice first meet, Eurydice thinks he's nuts because, of course, he's like, I'm going to sing a song and it's going to save the world. And she's like, okay. But then he sings what he's working on and at the end, he produces a flower and she's like, what? And he's like, I don't know, it just happens, but I feel like if I do this right, maybe spring will happen. And she's like, oh, okay, then finish it, do it. And it comes back a few times, but the key one is at the very end when he's getting through to Hades and Persephone by singing this song. Hades is like, wait a minute, how do you know that tune? And this has been planned before because when Orpheus is singing this in Hermes' presence, Hermes is like, oh, that's a very old song. And as they're singing it together, Hades and Persephone, he kind of like almost rasps it out like he's not used to singing, even though he is, because he had a banging musical number like 10 minutes earlier. But the impression is that, you know, he hasn't used the pipes in a while. And at the end, he produces the flower. And it's like, oh, okay, so it's not an Orpheus thing, it's the song. The song is the magic.
Apparently they were doing graphics for the concept album, I believe, and everyone had an item that they were holding. Orpheus had a banjo at the time. I think the Fates had a lantern, and they didn't know what to give Eurydice, and then the artists just took it upon themselves and made the flower. And then after that, it got incorporated into the actual play, which I'm amazed that it came in so late. It feels like such a central thing. Because
it parallels so many of the themes. So our song is this creation of spring that is like Persephone's power, but the only people we see utilizing the power itself are Orpheus and Hades, which is so interesting because Hades is supposed to be this sort of like dark character with like Persephone is the brightness, but then Hades is given this ability to create life as well. What could he do if he was given that option outside of the dark? What could he do?
It's an interesting thing that gets established early on when Orpheus is singing the story of Hades and Persephone, and he talks about how it gives them the cycle of the seed and the sickle, that if you don't have Hades and Persephone together, if you don't have the cycle of Persephone leaving and then coming back, you don't have spring, summer, fall, winter. You don't have agriculture because the seasons don't change and the flowers don't grow the way they're supposed to. And the impression is like, oh, well, Persephone is the only part of that matters. And it's like, no, Hades is very important. She's the seed, he's the sickle. And I like that it's not just, oh, Persephone good, Hades bad. Of course, by the end, they reconcile, and it's very clear that, like, hey, we've set healthy boundaries in our relationship, and now we're going to go back to the way that this is supposed to work, and it's going to be great. Hades is still a bad dude, but he's not like a categorical supervillain that needs to stop existing for the world to work the way it's supposed to. He's kind of vital to it. He's a god. It's sort of how it works.
Yeah. I think they walk such a fine line with him, especially with his relationship with Eurydice, because that feels so insidious and grim. And I remember actually even watching it the first time, I was like, how are we going to bring Hades back from this? Surely there's no way that we're going to redeem Hades in the eyes of the audience at this point in any way. And yet somehow they do still manage to, which I think is really fascinating. And maybe it's because it's sort of left in that allegorical space that the whole play sort of occupies. You know, is this New Orleans? Is this ancient times? Is this the future? So it's not entirely clear sort of what happened there, but it's really interesting. It feels like a very nervy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that line where he's like,
if you don't even want my love,
I'm going to give my love to a bird that appreciates the golden cage.
Yeah.
He recognizes that he is a toxic person and that the love he gives is inherently imprisoning, but he's sort of lost himself too much to actually care.
His argument is, everything I do it for the love of you. If you don't even want my love, I'll give it to someone who does. Someone who appreciates the comforts of a gilded cage and doesn't try to fly away the moment Mother Nature calls. And it's pretty clear that Eurydice is not replacing Persephone in this dynamic, because when they sign that contract, Eurydice just joins the rest of the ununionized workers of the dead. He sings Hey Little Songbird, which is so creepy, but I love it. And I guess the way I saw that, like allegorically speaking, was not he just shows up and is like, hey, you should come to my cool mansion. Nothing bad's going to happen. It's that Eurydice is out in a blizzard without her coat, and Death shows up and is like, hey, you know, it would be really comfortable hanging out with me. And she's like, that does sound better than this. And at that point, I almost don't even blame Hades as a person. I'm like, he's a god. He embodies this. Like, he's
kind of doing his job.
He's kind of doing his job. Yeah. Like, obviously, you know, if you separate out the meaning of Hades from the scene, it's like, okay, spooky robber baron shows up and is like, hey, ditch your lame boyfriend. Come hang out in my palatial estate. And that's not good. But the way that it's framed is more like Eurydice is at her absolute lowest point, and this guy reaches out a hand and is like, here, 2 coins, passage to the underworld.
And the rattle of the coins being the rattle of the rattlesnake tail.
Oh.
Love that detail, that's so good.
I didn't really take it as a particularly personal thing on the part of Hades. Again, this is kind of his job, and it really seems like Eurydice was just like, nearest person I can find to make a point to my wife. There's the little bit about like, who knows what happens behind closed doors, but Eurydice gets her contract signed and her standard issue sexy dystopian cyberpunk overall set, and then basically just gets set to build the wall with everybody else. And Hades and Persephone go back to having their weird toxic power play situation. But I also like that they leave it kind of vague, because the implication is, of course, very obvious, with Hades being like, all right, wife, fine, I'll find somebody else to play with. And then the fact that Eurydice chooses to go with Hades instead of Orpheus, there's obvious subtext there if you want to interpolate it that way, but the way it's played out, it doesn't get too egregious in any given dimension.
That kind of ties into the original myth as well, with Eurydice dying on her wedding day, being spiritual by Hades. I think it's a good way of acknowledging that part of it without necessarily leaning so heavily into it that it becomes a very different kind of story.
Yeah,
basically.
exactly.
And then you have like a fun number after Build the Wall to like, you know, start the second act, so you're not too...
Oh, I love Build the Wall.
I can't believe that Build the Wall was written before Trump's presidential campaign. That terrifies me.
But it's such a good song.
It is such a great song.
The call and response.
I heard it out of context before I'd listened to the rest of the soundtrack, because Philosophy Tube, she did a cover of it at the ending of one of her videos a while back, and I listened through it and I was like, oh, this is a banger. I don't even know what this is about. But it's so good. And I think the fact that it's kind of a cycle, it's call and response, but also it comes full circle, ties in again with the theme of like, everyone in this story is kind of trapped. Everyone is playing out the same old song, and especially the dead are trapped, and time doesn't really move for them the way it does for anybody else.
The music really supports that, I think. Chant building up as the play goes on, and the leitmotif from Doubt comes in Wait for Me earlier on with the Fates, which is kind of like almost drowned out, but the suggestion of it planted there. There's so many fun little things like that.
Yeah.
That just mostly go over my head as a non-music person, but the ones that I've seen, I'm like, wow, cool, awesome.
Yeah, no, definitely. They do a lot of really interesting stuff. The way that Orpheus's song, whenever he's singing it normally, there's this echo, this reverb, everything joins in, all the background singers join in, except right at the end when he's trying to lead Eurydice out of the underworld. And Hades says, every coward seems courageous in the safety of the crowd. Bravery can be contagious when the band is playing loud. When Orpheus sings after that, he doesn't have his magical backup choir. It's just one guy singing, and it sounds very alone.
It's this liminal space that a lot of demigods seem to exist in within myth, in trying to push towards that divine power that they almost have but don't quite have. They're sort of committing theomachy, like battle with the gods.
Yeah.
And you can see in like Hades, with like how he interacts with Orpheus, he recognizes that Orpheus is a direct threat to his power just by existing.
Yeah.
Being able to shift between the two, whereas Hades is stuck firmly in one place and therefore has kind of stagnated.
I think it's interesting that Persephone and Hermes both like Orpheus a lot, but it's clearly like, he's not on our level, but we can help him out. Whereas Hades is like, he's not on my level. Why is he unionizing my guys? He's so mad.
Do we want to talk about visuals, like costume design, staging and stuff?
Ooh, yeah.
Straight out the gate, I have to be like, the workers in the background are so non-binary. Because no matter the perceived gender of each of the actors, they all have the exact same outfit, the binding and the overalls.
I love the overalls, yeah.
You know, even under capitalism, non-binary slave.
I was very impressed by how jacked all the background actors were.
Yeah, oh my god.
Cast people who look really, really good when we do harsh top-down lighting.
The physical theatre of it all, they're so precise movements like they are in the machinery.
Yeah. One of the actors for the background people, she was doing so much with her face. Anytime something happened, you could tell exactly what that character was thinking and feeling about it. And I was like fascinated. Every time something big was happening in the beginning, I was like, I wonder what background extra number 4 thinks. Oh, she's not happy. During the Keep Your Head Low section, when Hades is kind of like walking through, there's a bit where she's about to sing the part and then she actually recoils in fear from Hades while she sings Keep Your Head Low. And I was like, she's given everything for this performance and she doesn't even technically have lines. This is awesome. Honestly, the background guys, there's a lot going on with them, because in the part where Orpheus is kind of going around and singing and they're all sort of remembering who they are, the way they signify that is like they take off their little hats and they look around, and the implication is a lot of these guys didn't remember who they were in life and what their relationships were, but some of these guys were like partners or friends or like knew each other because they have this moment of like recognition. Some of them are like holding hands with each other when they try to walk out of the underworld. Very interesting that Orpheus's music lets them remember, oh, guy I was shoveling next to for the last 10,000 years is actually my bro. This is great. The amount of acting you have to do to portray something that complicated in characters that don't have lines and aren't in the center stage and shouldn't even be focused on is very cool.
Tying those things together, the costuming being all exactly the same does that thing of losing their individuality, and then when you get the helmets off and everyone sort of standing up, that moment of, oh, these are actually people as well.
Yeah.
It's another fourth wall break of, oh, the chorus are real. Have fun. Now you have to deal with the fact that they're individual people.
I like that all of the fates are dressed exactly identically, but are very, very different underneath that.
Persephone is dressed in the first act when everyone else is in those muted sepia tones, and she's just this like green brightness. That's amazing.
I love her goth look when she goes into the underworld too.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
The massive shoulder spikes.
Yeah. Hades' sleeve tattoo of the wall is pretty stupid, but I'm very happy that it exists. In terms of stagecraft, at the beginning of the play, when everything is in this sort of cozy, nice set with a little stairwell that leads up to a little balcony, and then when we go to the underworld, it like pushes back and the back part slides apart. And it reveals this like 30-foot high electric lighting wall set behind everything. Much taller than anything in the set had been up to that point. And I was not prepared for that. I was sitting pretty close to the stage, so I got the full like, oh, that's big. And it really helped sell like, oh, that's what Hades is the master of? Oh boy, I think our boy's out of his depth.
It's so imposing. It's such a good moment.
And again, when the swinging lights come out in Wait for Me, the tabs on either side, I don't know if this happened on Broadway, but in the National, the tabs on either side of the stage came away. So the entire stage was physically wider.
Wow.
So that the lights could swing further.
Out into the audience, basically, yeah.
Insane. And then they had the smoke going. It felt so suddenly immersive.
They couldn't quite widen the stage in the version I saw, but it definitely felt like, oh, this is bigger and more all-consuming than it was before.
Apparently the first line that Mitchell came up with for the show was "Wait for me, I'm coming," as she was driving home to her boyfriend, having been touring. When she was driving along this highway and it was the streetlights sort of going, and it was that weird feeling of liminal space. This is going on forever and I'm completely on my own. And then when she told the director about that, the director was like, "Oh, here's how I think we should stage this." And that was where the swinging lights came through, which I think is very cool.
I was wondering about that. Mostly I was just like, please don't get clocked in the head by it.
Honestly, how do they do that every night? The choreography.
I don't know, but I can understand how all the background extras are that ripped now. Just so much happening.
The dodging.
Yeah.
All the squats.
The lighting design is just so spicy throughout the entire play.
Yeah.
Especially at the end when they're going back through the underworld and they're on the turntable. The way the lighting is positioned so that you literally can't see Eurydice.
At all.
Yeah.
Oh, that was so good.
It's very impressive. It creates this almost physical blackness behind Orpheus, and you're just kind of like, well, I hope she's there. And the way that they do this growing sunlight as they are clearly approaching the surface right before he turns around and everything freezes is just like, oh, buddy, oh, you're so close.
I love that happens on her verse, because I feel like I was expecting it to sort of be that we would get like an Orpheus narration where he goes, "I'm really feeling it, Mr. Krabs. I'm really getting there. I feel like I have to turn around," and then turn around. But he sort of interrupts her, which has that moment of like absolute shock where you're expecting it, you know how the story goes, but at that moment, you're kind of not expecting it.
Yeah. Yeah, the building dread as you're like, this is when it's gonna happen. And like he's singing and she's in the dark behind him and you're like, I just don't know. But then they confirm for the benefit of the audience, she's there. She's been there the whole time. He just can't hear her. And that makes it worse, makes it hurt so much more. Because it really does make it clear like he can't hear them at all. He thinks he's alone. We know. But we're as powerless to tell him as Eurydice and the forces of the dead are. We are basically stuck in their shoes, and we are just as shocked when he turns around as Eurydice is. Which is good. That's good and sad, because it means that we're not in Orpheus's shoes at that moment. We're not like, I wouldn't make that dumb decision. We're in Eurydice's shoes, powerless. And it sucks, but in a really good way.
The parallels to the moment in Act 1 where she's trying to get his attention because she's like, "Hey, we're starving to death, you need to stop with the song for a minute." And I'm not sure if the choreography changed again with Broadway, but at least in the London version they had that moment where they were walking on the turntable. He has the sort of notes and is humming it, and she's trying to get his attention, and he doesn't turn around.
There's a lot of very interesting use of the turntable to produce the illusion of space on an otherwise, normal-sized stage.
And the rise and fall of it as well is fantastic. Apparently that was the sort of a thing that they were getting a bit of complaint about with earlier versions, is they didn't have it, so Eurydice had to sort of either walk off stage or be carried off stage, and people were like, it just didn't feel right. I can imagine it doesn't feel right for Eurydice to leave of her own power.
It's me. Okay.
Okay, bye.
Dives behind a bush. Oh, she's gone.
Exactly. The slow sink. I can't imagine any more perfect way to do it. And then you have that moment of eye contact that's just agonizing.
Yeah. That also means that Orpheus can just be kneeling devastated next to the pit in the middle of the stage for the entire time that Hermes is doing his closing number, which is pretty rough. I think I briefly mentioned the thing at the end where they do the toast to Orpheus wherever he may be. And the interesting thing about listening to it on the album is I was like, oh, sounds like Orpheus vanishes at the end of the play. That's sad. What I didn't realize is that this is when they're doing the curtain call.
Yeah.
All of the actors are not in character anymore. And Orpheus, his actor, is there with his guitar. And he's part of the toast to Orpheus wherever he may be. And I was like, oh, this is a very different framing for this scene than I envisioned when I just heard it on the album. That's really interesting. I really like that because it again highlights this is a story. This is a story that we're telling. We're taking on these roles, but also theoretically, this is a thing that happened. I feel like it's part of the cushioned cathartic ending to the play. Because again, the way we're describing it, it ends so sadly. How can we end with good feelings about it? Oh, it ends with a time loop that makes it clear that this is going to keep happening forever? How is that better? It's hard to explain. They really do a good job of sort of softening the blow. The music gets very triumphant at the end. The fact that it ends with Orpheus and Eurydice's meet cute, and this moment still happened, even if it did end badly. And it's good to be reminded of that. But also the fact that at the curtain call, they're like, this was just a story. We're all having a good time. The actor's here. He's fine. Eurydice's fine. It's great. But the real Orpheus, if he's out there somewhere, good luck, buddy. And it's like, yeah, sucks to be that guy. Let's go get dinner. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. They pulled off a lot of things that I felt shouldn't have worked. And then it worked really well.
Yeah, it's such a bizarre moment because you've done the applause. And I think you're in a different brain space at that point. You're kind of thinking about like, where am I going to go get dinner? Leaving that space. And then in that, I guess, liminal space, you sort of get reminded of the fact that you are watching this play. And yeah, these are people who are going to go home. Then they're going to do this again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you sort of start thinking more about story rather than about the story that you just saw and about why we tell stories.
It's like meta and then also meta around that. Because there's the meta narrative within the story of Hermes telling the story and having seen the story play out over and over again. But then there's also the meta narrative of that guy is an actor playing Hermes, and these guys are all actors playing these characters. And why are you in the audience doing this to yourself? Why are you buying tickets to this musical when you know how it's going to end? It's interesting, but also it's weirdly comforting. There are a lot of stories where I'm like, if you break my immersion, I'm going to be mad. But in this case, I'm like, if you don't break my immersion, I'm going to be heartbroken. So thanks for breaking my immersion a little bit.
Final thoughts.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first. I rate this 5 out of 5. It was really fun to actually read the script for the first time because I've listened to the soundtrack as like my shower music for like the last 4 years. But I still didn't know some of the lyrics properly for half of it. So that was actually really interesting to sort of sit down with the words and actually think about it. I was reading them with the melody in my head at the same time, which was really fun. I hadn't really registered it as a retelling in the same way that I do most retellings and hadn't connected all mythology to it. So going back and looking at all of the research I did in third year for like Magic, Witchcraft and Ghosts module was really interesting. I just really love this musical. It has the same sort of lyricality as Hamilton, but I feel like it doesn't get as much hype and I feel like it should get more hype. It is so clever and it has all of that sort of motifs throughout the whole thing. It's just so good.
Yeah. I would also do 5 out of 5 stars. This is a very, very, very good musical. I think it's interesting how much better of an experience it is to see it on stage than it is to listen through the album. Because I, until recently, wasn't really much of a theater goer. I still am not much of a theater goer, but I didn't really see the appeal, especially with a lot of musicals where it's like, you could just listen to all the songs online. It's fine. Like, I've never seen Hamilton. I've just listened through the album so many times that I know the whole thing by heart. And it's like, oh, I know there's other stuff, but you go to the musical for the music. And now it's like, oh no, like you do go to the musical for the music, but it is dramatically improved by all the other stuff going on. Listening through the album didn't give me all those narrative thoughts about how layered it was and how it was telling a story about itself and also about storytelling. But seeing it, I was like, there's so much happening, and I don't understand how the visual component added this much extra dimensionality to it. I feel like this is a case of a story that absolutely fascinates me because I don't understand how it does the things that it does that are good. I just find that really interesting. I like understanding how stories work and why the parts of them that work do work. And it's cool to me that I have almost no idea why this one works as well as it does. 5 stars, excellent. Definitely go watch it with friends if you can manage it. And mask up. Be responsible.
Yeah, I mean, this is also a 5 stars from me. Ironically, we've joked a lot about on the Hidden Bookcase about the fact that like nothing makes me cry. We've now officially done something on the Hidden Bookcase that makes me cry, and it's not a book. This has, definitely got me both times I saw it.
Oh, yeah.
It's so good. We sort of didn't really even touch very much on Mitchell's lyrics, but they're so poetic and gorgeous. If you do get the opportunity to see this, do what you have to do. Beg, borrow, steal, etc. I really think it's worth it.
Just rereading it, I cried.
I cried as well. There may have been a slime tutorial involved, but if there was a pro shoot, I would have bought the pro shoot. I had no other choice.
I might have missed it up when I saw it live. I think the building dread of like, oh, it's gonna happen, but I don't remember exactly when it happens, but it's gonna happen in the next couple minutes was like getting to me.
It's paralyzing.
Yeah, but then they were like, shush, it's okay, it's fine, it was just a story, don't worry. Look, here's their meet cute again, everything's fine, we're all gonna do our bows. And I was like, yeah, everything is okay.
Okay, do we have any recommendations for people that liked Hadestown?
The Locked 2, always good. I recommend reading Harrow the Ninth twice because it's very complicated. I had certain things spoiled for me before I started reading it, and I'm glad because otherwise I would have tapped out about 30 pages in.
Okay.
As soon as it started gaslighting me about the events of the previous book, I would have been gone. I would have just been too confused.
Locked 2, absolutely fantastic. Also for themes of grief and cycles and toxic relationships.
The horrifying power of love, always a fun one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Morgan, you had a few, right?
Yeah, I mean, I have a bunch of Persephone and Hades retellings that I haven't read, but I've heard great things about. There's No Season But the Summer by Matilda Lacer. It's a Hades and Persephone retelling, but it's set in modern day. Basically, Persephone's like, I'm sick of Demeter, I'm sick of Hades, both of you are trying to control me, I'm going to off to the human world, see you guys. And sort of like her reprocessing all of her relationships and sort of figuring out how she fits into the new world, which I really want to read. And then the other one is Girl Goddess Queen by B. Fitzgerald, which is a retelling, fake dating romance where I think both of them are bisexual and Persephone's like, I'm going to jump into hell because I feel like it. Oh, also, In Strange Woods, the podcast by Atypical Artist. It has Patrick Page in it as one of the main characters who plays Hades. And it's about a town processing grief when one of them goes missing and dies in the woods.
Ooh.
And they're like, this was perfectly preventable, but it wasn't prevented. And now we're trying to deal with this trauma. And it's a musical, but it's a podcast, and it's by some of my favorite people. Oh, it's beautiful. It's so good. Would recommend. It's only 5 episodes, but the actual soundtrack is also on Spotify.
It's so fantastic. Definitely sold me on the format of podcast musicals.
In terms of other musicals, wildly unrelated, it's just the second musical I saw after this one. Beetlejuice the musical is really fun.
Beetlejuice is so fun.
It also has themes of grief and stuff, but like, oh man.
It's also got a descent into the underworld and then a return from it.
It does,
That's
yeah.
true.
And they also don't get the person back from the dead because that's not how being alive works. It definitely handles grief in a very interesting way. It's also hysterically funny.
I've only got one recommendation for this, which is also something that we've done on the podcast, so apologies to anyone who has read the books that we've done on the podcast, but The Starless Sea by Aaron Morgenstern, which is also very meta and about why we tell stories, and it also features a journey to get someone back from sort of, not the underworld, a fantasy realm, a sea made of honey.
Sounds viscous.
I'm rereading it right now, and I'm like, the vibes, the meta, the storytelling.
And mild spoiler, but that one has a happy ending, so that's nice. And as always, all of this will be in the show notes. But before we go, oh my gosh, Red, thank you so much. It was so good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
So insightful. That was so fun.
I'm glad. I wasn't even sure what was going to come out when I started talking.
I don't think either of us ever know when we start an episode.
Oh my goodness. No, I had a great time. I haven't had a chance to really dish on this one since like the night that I saw it, because afterwards it's like, boy, let's just do other stuff. Let's like think about things that aren't sad for a while. And now it's like, but no, there's stuff here. There's a mystery to unravel. How did they do it? So,
do you have anything you want to tell people about?
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, I am 50% of the YouTube channel, Overly Sarcastic Productions. I do discuss myths, and I also have a series called Trope Talks where I talk about tropes. You could probably guess that part. And it's basically part of my ongoing effort to understand why some stories are good and other stories are bad. So you can see why this is kind of my white whale right now. Like, it's good, but I can't understand why. So my ongoing descent into madness tends to be the appeal there. The myths tend to be a little bit more far afield. I do an awful lot of Greece just because that's the stuff we have the most literature about. Recently did a thing about the 9 realms of Norse mythology. Spoiler alert, there are not actually 9 of them. So that was pretty fun. And I also have a webcomic that I do called Aurora at comicaurora.com. It is not related to any of that stuff. I just thought it would be fun to do a little fantasy story, superhero kind of thing. Just the story I wanted to be able to read when I was 10. All fun stuff.
What are we doing next, Morgan?
Next month is Dark Academia month for all of those kids going back to school. Mainly me. I'm going back to school to do my master's.
Good luck.
Someone save me. But anyway, to really get into that mood, we will be starting off with Vicious by V.E. Schwab. We will be having a guest. We'll be having L.M. Clohessy, who is a friend of the show and the director of our other show, The Attic Monologues. And until then, you're always welcome through the bookcase.
Don't forget to scratch the cat on your way out. Thank you for listening to The Hidden Bookcase, a production of Planar Prod. On this episode, you heard Overly Sarcastic Productions' Red, Morgan Greensmith, and Soren Briarwood discussing Hadestown by Anaïs Mitchell. You can find out more about this musical at hadestown.com, and you can follow Mitchell at Anaïs Mitchell on Twitter. A huge thank you to Red for joining us for this episode. You were absolutely legendary. You can find Red's videos on myth, storytelling, and more on the Overly Sarcastic Productions YouTube channel, and tweeting from @OSPYouTube on Twitter. You can find Red's fantasy webcomic, Aurora, which follows a ragtag crew of heroes on a journey to rescue a god from an immortal witch at comicaurora.com. You can find The Hidden Bookcase on Twitter @Hidden Bookcase, and on Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, and TikTok @Hidden Bookcase Podcast. Find out more about Planar Prod at planarprod.com. Know what we should read next, or want to chat to us about what you thought of this episode's read? You can reach us at thehiddenbookcase@gmail.com, send us a DM on social media, or join our growing community of bookworms on our Discord server. The link is in the show notes. Want to support The Hidden Bookcase? You can donate on Patreon for bonus episodes every month, outtakes, playlists, and other extras. Or consider leaving us a rating or review, or telling a friend how to find us. Your whispers are the best way for bookworms to discover our show. We're bringing back Dark Academia month this September. On our next episode, which will be out on Monday, the 11th of September, we'll be discussing Vicious by V.E. Schwab, along with friend of the show, L.M. Clohessy. We hope to see you then, and in the meantime, you're always welcome through the bookcase.